back in Dubai after a prolonged absence. And I will say that though I'm disappointed I didn't figure out the road trip, a 90-minute flight on a tiny little budget airline was way easier than the prospect of a 14-hour overnight long-haul bus with no shower. So this should be a good week here. I'm looking forward to some of the ideas I have planned, and hopefully the things I want to do here are more easily accomplished than in Saudi. With how high-tech and global Dubai is, upon when you first plane, it makes Riyadh seem small, quaint by comparison. Just the sheer number of nationalities and languages that you encounter the moment you step into Dubai International Airport. You kind of realize that everywhere else sort of feels secondary in terms of its development and level of globalization. Riyadh felt very global, particularly for its, its role in Hajj tourism, people going from other parts of the world to the holy cities. This is a whole different ballgame. And just like that, I'm seamlessly going from the airport to the metro system. Wow, it's just that easy. And it's amazing that they give you a SIM card at immigration. They give you what they call a due tourist SIM. So I'm already online on my phone. It's amazing. Of course, it's also probably a way to keep track of people while they're here. The UAE is a very intense security state, and they probably have deals with the Israelis and the Chinese, and so you can be cynical and also love this stuff at the same time. Where Dubai is now is where Riyadh is trying to get to, and although they've made a lot of progress, there's a lot of catching up to do on the Saudi side of the equation if they want to get to where the Emiratis are in terms of transportation infrastructure. And they'll probably get there. By the way, they're looking like they're close to done, although several people in Riyadh told me that these trains have been delayed over and over again because of corruption, and that Saudi Arabia is just not simply as efficient at building things and finishing projects as the UAE is. It amazes me how far Dubai's metro has come in the context of how much it has integrated itself into the city and how much the city has absorbed the metro into its daily life. I've been coming to Dubai, I have to confess, I'm dating myself here, but I've been coming to Dubai for a very long time. I first set foot here in 1999 when I was on my way from Karachi in Sindh in Pakistan back to the United States. And I remember back in the days, like in 2007, 2008, I was spending a lot of time here in Dubai. I was going back and forth to Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India, and so forth. And I remember when the metro was just being built, and at the time it kind of seemed like a pipe dream. Now it is just so much a reality of everyday Dubai. It was built rather by a French and Japanese consortium. And it is very much, people decry Dubai's artifice and the rapidity which things are done here in relation to human rights and the environment. But, you've got this town that was built on big oil, or at least this nation state that was built on big oil. And they made a real metro, and it really works. It's totally a thing. And there is definitely something to be said for that. Now I've got to remember how to walk to my hotel that I haven't been to in like 4 or 5 years. Back in the day, in my early days here in Dubai, travel like this wasn't possible. You had to take a very long taxi ride from the airport into town, and you had to know where you were going. And now with the metro and having 2 legs and also a giant backpack, you can arrive to Dubai backpack style, like super easily if you don't mind doing some walking in the very humid air. But I am so happy to be back here right now. So this hotel right here, the Trip Wyndham in the Barsha Heights section of Dubai, which is off the Internet City metro station. This is where I stayed in 2019 when I was last really flourishing. I had just been in Syria for like a month or something, just crushing articles and projects and working in north of Iraq. And boy, it feels really good to be back here. This hotel is nothing fancy in particular, like you might think of Dubai, but it is exactly my kind of vibe. It's super chill. The Dubai Metro broke ground in March 2006, and although not entirely completed, it launched in September of 2009, setting an incredible, I think, record for actually getting a metro off the ground and creating a model for some of the other monarchies in this region that seek to emulate Dubai, or compete with it, maybe more accurately. By comparison, the Doha Metro in Qatar broke ground in 2012 and launched in 2019, so almost double the time it took for Dubai to get its metro going. And the Riyadh Metro broke ground in 2014 and is still not operating. Dubai has taken a lot of criticism over the last 2 decades for its human rights record related to migrant workers, and probably less so about its very opaque justice and prison system. But its successes also can't be overshadowed. The things that Dubai has achieved in the last, I would say, 20 to 25 years are absolutely unbelievable, and it's the speed and efficiency at which it's done them. It's incredible. And part of the reason I think why there has been the focus on the human rights aspect with regard to migrant labor, primarily from Egypt, South Asia, and the Philippines, is just the time that we're living in. It's the amount of media that we consume, social media, all the outlets that we have access to. And like when I was growing up, there weren't these sorts of things. There were like 3 television networks, and there were some national newspapers like, you know, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post. There wasn't all that much media. I didn't even grow up with cable, so we didn't really know what was going on in the rest of the world, you know, vis-a-vis you know, broader human rights issues in places like the Gulf and, you know, and Northeast Asia and stuff like that. We just didn't have access to that kind of information. My first order of business is to come here to the Dubai Mall, where I'm walking a long way from the metro to get some micro SD cards for this GoPro, because my cards are full from Iraq, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia, and I also don't really have time to edit all of them when I'm traveling, and partly it's because my hotels are costing too much, and I'd rather be out shooting content, and I'm just gonna have to edit it, I think, when I get home. So this is my first sort of chore in Dubai. And somewhat similar to my Saudi episode, I'm gonna probably just scat off some kind of unorganized thoughts in no particular order, just about Dubai, things that I think as I think of things. So here is the Japanese global book chain, Kinokuniya Books, and I was in this chain in 2019, and I was looking for a book by probably my favorite nonfiction author, who is Steve Call, who is an American journalist who's written a lot of books about Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia and those kinds of topics. And he had a new book that had come out in 2019 that I was looking for here, and it said it was for sale on the website of the store, but when I came to buy it, it wasn't actually buyable. And it was because what I was told by the helpful employees here is that the book had not passed the censorship board yet. It had not gone through the proper channels to be able to be sold in the UAE, and that was going to take some time. And I said, but you have the book for sale listed on your website. And they said, yes, you can order it online to be shipped outside of the UAE, but you can't actually buy it within the UAE. And this is, kind of an interesting, here, let me give you a little small reason why this is particularly interesting, because the book was about the history of the Taliban in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and in the 1990s and the early 2000s, the United Arab Emirates was one of the 3 nation states that recognized the Taliban as the legitimate government of Afghanistan, along with Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, from where I've just come. And so I think for the UAE, Mr. Call's book was controversial, and maybe they really had to go over it with a fine-tooth comb to see if it was something that could be sold here in Dubai. And that's just one little note. That's the last time I was here at the Dubai Mall, and I just remembered it as I walked in, because when you're coming from the metro, the bookshop kind of greets you as you enter the mall. So I was only able to get the title Directorate S, the UK paperback edition, when I went to the Kinokuniya in Bangkok, and I found it in a mall there. So I ultimately did succeed in getting the title I was looking for, but I had to literally go to another part of the world. Now, coming back to the bookstore 4 years after I was last in Dubai, I can see that a colleague and friend's book, Meg Coker, The Spy Master of Baghdad, is for sale here. And just next to hers, I found this other book, The Spy's Son, which my work in Malaysia in 2010 is actually referenced in. It's a book about a Russian mole in the CIA in the 1990s, and his son, who later became a mole. And my work in Kuala Lumpur is actually referenced here on page 53. This is kind of exciting. And then here in the footnotes, there I am, Derek Henry Flood. This is really cool. I've never actually seen this book before. I've only seen this on Google Books. So, I mean, back in New York, I never really go to bookstores anymore. You just buy everything on Amazon. So there's something beautiful about being in a bookstore. This obviously must have passed the censorship board here in Dubai. But yeah, this is really exciting. I think I'm actually going to purchase this book just to, one, it looks like a fun title, but also just to have it in my library. This is a total score. I did not expect this coming in here. And then funnily, this is the stack that Mr. Call's books would be in. And you can see my friend Meg, her last name is Coker, and Steve Call's book would be somewhere in here, and none of his titles, not Ghost Wars, not the Bin Ladens, it looks like none of his titles are here. Well, spontaneously, I just went and bought the book that my work was cited in. Wow. I'm pretty psyched about this. It just feels so good to see something that you've worked so hard on actually out there in the world. Now I've got to find the Virgin store, which it looks to be straight ahead, to get the SanDisk Extreme cards. Hopefully they have them. Okay, score. These were not available in Jordan. Apparently SanDisk was not for sale in Jordan. And obviously you weren't going to find these in Iraq. And I couldn't find any place, I'm sure they have them in Riyadh, but I couldn't find any place that sold them. Maybe I didn't try hard enough. But yeah, this was really easy. Dubai has such a vivid hustle grind energy that I kind of almost feel like I'm back in New York. Like I'm in this mall and I'm just walking so fast and there's so many people. And I haven't felt this way in Riyadh or Amman or even Beirut because of the crisis going on there. I almost feel like I'm one step closer to home. It feels like I'm walking around Manhattan, just the energy in here. This is the walkway to the Museum of the Future. And it does certainly feel futuristic. Look how minimalist it is. And there's hardly anyone walking through here. Oh man, I have to say the approach feels cool already. One marked difference between the cities and countries that I've just been in, Saudi, Iraq, and Jordan, is I'm hearing a lot of Russian spoken here in Dubai. I mean, more than before the pandemic and before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And I'm wondering if this is a result of the EU sanctions against Russia and Russian companies, and maybe Russians are coming to the UAE, which is the UAE has refused to condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It is neutral at best, I think you could say, which has frustrated a number of Western leaders who, the Emirates is at least nominally an ally, and they wanted the Emirates to be on side against the Russian Federation's occupation of Ukraine, and the UAE has refused to play ball. I'm wondering if that has to do with what seems like a surplus of Russians here. There appear to be a lot of young Russian women here who just sort of look like Instagram models. Maybe that's kind of the default. It's just really how it appears. You see a lot of them posing around and all that. It's somewhat amusing. Wow. Look at the entryway to this place. Man. This is wicked cool. It's funny, I haven't even paid for admission yet, and it kind of feels like you're already inside the museum before you get in it. There's some really chilled out ambient music playing. Well, it turns out it is not possible to visit the Museum of the Future while I'm here. I guess I'll have to come back in the future. Sorry guys, I couldn't resist that one. The concierge said that there were not tickets until May 7th, and I'm only here till like May 1st. So that's a bit disappointing, but even seeing the outside of it's pretty cool. And it was worth coming here to check out. The lobby is pretty amazing as well. So now I'm going to try and go to the Dubai frame and hopefully get a ticket for that. Here we have this giant hand, which is essentially a huge three-dimensional selfie station. Man, this is surreal. Too bad it's not possible to actually visit. Okay, this is try number 3 for today. I'm here with Nasib, and he is from Khost, Afghanistan, and he's also visiting Dubai, and we're trying to go to the Dubai frame, which is like 50 dirhams, and we're hoping to get a ticket after we both weren't allowed into the Museum of the Future and told we have to come back in the future. And I couldn't get a ticket to the Green Planet, so inshallah we will get entry in here. Nasib and I successfully got tickets here to the Dubai frame, and I believe this was completed when I was here in 2018. But I never went to the effort to try and actually come here. And yeah, there's an elevator that we're gonna take all the way to the top, where there is a sky bridge akin to the Kingdom Tower or Kingdom Center in Riyadh. The scale of this thing is absolutely massive. So on the way up to the sky bridge for the frame, there's a history lesson about the development of the Emirates. I'm guessing this is from sometime in the first half of the 20th century. It's a pretty cool projection. So the museum seems to be sort of an ode to the early economic development and humble beginnings of the pre-oil Emirates. And this part gets to the discovery of oil, displaying an offshore drilling platform here. And here you can see when the UAE is beginning to modernize and build up from the desert out of nothing. We are in a packed elevator going up, I assume, towards the sky bridge. They don't really explain anything. Oh, but this is cool. This thing soars above the city. Very cool. The see-through floor on the frame is really wild. You definitely can't have a fear of heights to walk on this thing. So the overall conceptual theme behind the frame is that it's a window into the old and the new Dubai. And here you have, this is the view of the new Dubai, and on the grounds there you can see a portrait in the grass of Sheikh Al-Rashid bin Maktoum. And then here, off in the distance, you have the skyline led by the Burj Khalifa of New Dubai. Here, through the other side of the frame, you've got the low-slung original Dubai of the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. It's quite a different perspective. And here is a massive projection about Dubai as it's imagined in the future. I have to say this was a pretty cool experience. It's also really interesting to me in terms of political ideology, this idea of what I'll call a monarchical future. You know, in the early 90s, when I was in high school and the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc were very rapidly collapsing and sort of, for better or worse, democratizing, I think, except for the case of the Russian Federation and, well, I guess in a different manner, Ukraine, you know, I think it was, I'd like to think it was mostly a good thing, at least in Eastern Europe. And there was a thinking in the 90s, especially in the early 90s, like 92, 93, 94, that the world was going to default basically to democracy, and that American exceptionalists would help to sort of steer the world into a democratic future. Now, this didn't apply to this oil-producing region here in the Gulf. You know, these were America's allies. They helped, you know, literally fuel the United States in a very specific way. And so to the, you know, the monarchies here it wasn't really applicable, the idea of further and further democratization. And in Western Europe and Northern Europe, monarchs by the 90s had long since become sort of ceremonial figureheads who were, you know, maybe they were the head of state, but they didn't have any real power. It was kind of, you know, cute by that point. But what's so interesting here in Dubai is that, you know, this frame has a sort of this futuristic 3D you know, animation when you leave, and it's all about, you know, like the Emirate of Dubai and the UAE exploring space and colonizing Mars, you know, all while observing, you know, clothing norms and cultural norms and gender norms and stuff like that. And it's just really interesting because I think this is a future that a lot of people in the West had never really imagined, and I don't think people here in the Gulf imagined it either. Yet here we are, and it's very interesting to see where this is going to end up. I don't think anybody really knows, but it's absolutely fascinating, and there's a lot to think about in Dubai, just beyond, you know, well beyond oil. Of course, Dubai is already in a post-oil, tourism-focused economy, but yeah, there's just a lot to think about here. All right, well, Nasib and I are parting ways, but we both enjoyed the gargantuan frame here and the sky bridge atop. It's basically a giant observatory. It doesn't have any functional purpose. It's just basically a view of Dubai, and it was the winner in an architectural competition. So what did you think, Nassim?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
It was good. Dubai's never been known as a terribly walkable city, but here's something about it. If you're traveling here, spending just a couple of days, the metro system kind of acts as your guide, because so long as you're following it, you'll eventually find a stairwell, an escalator, an elevator to where you can at least get on the metro. And that's not true for a lot of other cities in this part of the world. And it's one thing that's really cool about the metro here. So this area that I'm walking from, where the frame is, I don't know this section of the city that well, but then here, this looks to be a metro station. I've actually been just sort of low-key following this guy ahead of me, who I'm guessing is probably leaving a job and going to the metro. So that's one cool thing about the city, is that so long as you can find a station, you can eventually figure out where you're, you know, really trying to go, rather than walking around aimlessly.